if a self-driving car kills somebody and the car is a mistake, then whose mistake was it, right? The person in the car, the person who designed the algorithm, the insurance company behind it. Those are fairly complex issues, but I think the direction that we will have more automatic execution, the direction is clear. It's then a nuance to figure out who is going to be in charge and paying the bill.
Hi, I'm James Taylor, business creativity and innovation keynote speaker, and this is The Creative Life, a show dedicated to you, the creative. If you're looking for motivation, inspiration, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's an author, musician, entrepreneur, performer, designer, or thought leader. They'll share with you their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, and much, much more. You'll find show notes for this episode, as well as free training on creativity, over at jamestaylor.me. Enjoy this episode. Hi, it's James Taylor here, and I'm delighted today to welcome onto the show Christian Terwiesch. Christian is a professor in Wharton's Operation and Information Management Department and co-director of Penn's Mack Institute for Innovation Management. He also holds a faculty appointment in Penn's Perelman School of Medicine. Christian launched the first massive open online course, or MOOC, in business on Coursera platform, and by now, well over 500,000 students have enrolled in the course. His latest book, Connected Strategy, co-authored with Nicolaj Siggelkow, identifies the 4 pathways for turning episodic interactions into continuous relationships. My great pleasure to have Christian with us today. So welcome, Christian.
Hey, thanks, James. Thanks for having me on the show.
So share with everyone what's happening in your world just now.
Well, world is a complex thing. So let's talk a little bit about the world, and then let's talk about the book. So the world is spring. It's Philadelphia. I'm a cyclist. I don't ride a car. I ride a bicycle. And so I'm thrilled that finally the temperature is above freezing here, and I can wear shorts again. The book is an exciting period. You mentioned the new book coming out. So my colleague Nicolaj and I have been working on this for the last 2 years. It's really captured our passion for innovation, strategy, operations management. Really think and take a deep look at how firms are reorganizing their businesses to take advantage of connected technologies.
And where did your passion for the topic of innovation start? How did you get into this area, this field of study?
The curse of my life is I'm German, right? And if you're German, you're not particularly innovative. If on top of that you're an operations management professor, you have really the most boring job in the country. So if you think about then innovation, it shouldn't come as a surprise that I've always thought about innovation as a process. It's something very systematic, it's something very organized, rather than kind of sparks flying around or kind of you hugging the tree and getting a great idea. My rather Germanic way of innovation is like structure and process. That got me to write a book about 10 years ago with another colleague, Karl Ulrich, called Innovation Tournaments. And it was trying to outline a process, an architecture, a kind of a system for innovation that you could manage and measure. And that passion has stayed with me really all throughout my career. And so while I'm still not innovative, I can help make others more innovative. Maybe that's my role in life.
So we think about actually talking about cycling. I'm also a keen cyclist as well. And I think about cycling a lot of time, there's more of that kind of incremental innovation on the bikes. For example, I know Sky Team was one of the top teams about finding these little 1% wins all the time. There never seems like this in terms of much bigger innovation. When we talk about different, I guess, types of innovation, we hear a lot about incremental innovation and these big ideas. What's your thoughts in terms of the world of innovation, the different styles of innovation that you might have?
Yeah, I think, James, there's a fascinating kind of parallel use or kind of a good metaphor to think about sports and innovation. I've always thought about like 3 types of innovations. So one of the more kind of the improve what you have is you learn how to do a flip turn in swimming a little bit faster. You learn how to get a little bit more aerodynamic in your positioning on the bike. You kind of move your saddle around. It's very incremental. I call this Horizon 1 innovation. Horizon 2 innovation is a big step where you're kind of changing a product or a process fairly radically. You're doing something that other people have not done before. So if you're BMW, you're not just launching the new 3 Series, you come out with an electric car. Or if you're a swimmer, you might remember a couple of years ago, I think about 20, 25 years ago, they invented a new form of flip turn for the backstroke. And so was not just kind of improving what you had, it was just a very new way of kind of making that flip. And people were like diving like half through the pool after the turn. And the folks who did this first had the massive advantage. And then the third one, we call this Horizon 3 innovation, is where you create something where nothing has been done before. You're creating new markets. You're coming up with a technology, a science that has never existed before. And I'm not sure what the parallel kind of pattern in sports would be. It's really like coming up with a new discipline, right? Rather than swimming backstroke, you're just deciding to walk along the pool. You're just violating the rules. You're doing something that goes beyond anything that you've ever seen.
So your book, the book you've co-authored, it really delves into the customer experience around innovation. So it often feels like I see lots of books around innovation in doing like almost like costivation, reducing costs, innovation around creating new products and services. I haven't seen so much around customer experience. Obviously, customer experience is a much growing kind of field as well. So talk to me about the germination of this book. Why did you decide that this was an interesting area to explore the role of innovation in?
So over the last couple of years, Nicolaj and I saw a couple of really interesting patterns emerge. As you mentioned in the introduction, I do a lot of work in healthcare. I have a faculty appointment in the School of Medicine. And the big observation there is that we spend all the effort, all the care, all the kind of managerial supervision on the patient while they're in the hospital. And then we say goodbye, they go out of the hospital, they're on their own, and then they do stupid things. Right? If you think about dietary choices, exercise regimens, if you think about medication adherence, many things that are fundamentally driving the health of a patient are happening outside the healthcare system. So if you want to reach those kind of 99% of the time of the life of the patient where the health decisions are made, you have to think about connecting to the patient differently. I had a similar kind of observation here at Wharton. You mentioned also the online teaching that I've been doing, where my past view of the world has been that you come to Wharton for your 2-year MBA program, and while you're at Wharton, we are kind of doing everything we can to educate you, help you get a job, to kind of answer your questions. But then once you move into alumni status, you graduate, we might be after your money, but kind of you're no longer part of our daily lives. Right? You're no longer connected to the school. The idea of lifelong learning is to exactly break that pattern. It's like saying, look, you're part of our community forever now, rather than having like this kind of 2-year intense episode of kind of educational care, if you will. And I've seen this in other settings. Last maybe example for now is the world of consulting, where I've been contacted by a big professional service provider, big consulting firm, and they'd always had the model of they deploy like a partner with 2 or 3 associates. They sent them to the client, and for 6 or 8 weeks they work like day and night and kind of come up with a big PowerPoint presentation. After 8 weeks, they have the final presentation to the client. They have a glass of champagne, and then they move on. As opposed to thinking about a relationship that is always keeping the customer, in this case a firm seeking knowledge, always keeping them connected to the professional service firm. And so this idea of staying connected, moving away from the sporadic, episodic nature of interaction between customer and firm, of building really lasting relationships, I think that's really at the heart of our work.
And in the book, you talk about these 4 different areas of that you talk about: respond to, desire, creating a curated offering, coach behavior, and automatic execution. I'm interested in the curated offering. Talk to me a little bit about that, because that's not a term that I've heard so much as related to innovation.
Yeah, so let me go through the hierarchy. I'm not ducking your question. I think it's helpful as a context to remind what the 4 are, and then I think the curated offering stands out a little bit. They all stand out in their own ways, but start with what we call respond to desire, right? I mean, I think of Uber in particular, maybe Alexa, where I'm sitting there as a consumer, somewhat childlike, if you will, and I say like, I want it, right? And when I was 5 years old, I would say like, Mom, get me that, right? And so now as a consumer, I say like, I want an Uber, and I press a button on my phone, and the Uber arrives, and everything happens exactly as now the 50-year-old Christian wants it. Similarly, like again, if you think about music or ordering food, I tell Alexa, just order me that pepperoni pizza from the vendor down the street. And I tell the system, I tell the company exactly what I want. So that is very, I mean, it's an important form of connection, right? But it puts the customer in the driver's seat, and I deliver to the customer what the customer wants. Now, we have to realize that customers, and I'm saying this in a very neutral way, customers are not necessarily the smartest animals that are populating planet Earth, in the sense that oftentimes we as customers, we don't know what we want. And I'm happy to admit that, right? I mean, I might come home tired from work, and I might say, well, really, I'm tired. Netflix entertain me, right? I want to laugh. I want to see something funny. Or I'm thinking about my nutrition. I might tell Blue Apron, like, really, I don't want to deal with making choices on the platform where I order the food. Why don't you send me yummy stuff, right? And so this is the idea of curation, where we delegate some of the decision-making, we move the decision-making away from the customer to the firm, and that provides the firm an opportunity to shine, but it only really works if the firm really knows what I as a customer really like, right? I mean, if the firm would show me a comedy on Netflix that you might find funny, James, but I don't, I might get disappointed, right? And so this curated offering really requires very deep customer insights, and I think we as consumers are most familiar with it from what Amazon did already 15, 20 years ago. Customers like you have also enjoyed that, or customers who bought X might also want to buy Y. That's the most obvious form of curation.
And that curated idea, I'm just thinking as you're telling that story, you know, coming home after work, for example, there's lots of obviously studies around how the decision-making part of the brain gets exhausted throughout the course of the day. You've used up, you know, it's why a lot of people, like former presidents, have just had one set of clothes. You know, they don't have to make that decision. They don't want to have to. They want to focus on the key decisions. So I'm interested that curated offering. And obviously, you're bringing in now machine learning, deep learning, artificial intelligence there to almost help curate maybe better decisions that as humans, our brain is just too lazy at the end of the day to make. So you're actually helping the kind of the higher self of the individual.
I'm helping your higher self, and that's where we get into coach behavior. We draw the line there with curated offering in the sense that the firm makes a recommendation, and then, James, you choose what you want. Versus with coach behavior, you've heard this term nudging coming out of this kind of behavioral economics movement, psychology movement, where we realize exactly what you just described, that we know we want to be healthy, we know we want to save for retirement, and we're sometimes just too tired, too lazy, or just something else stands in the way. And so with this nudging, the system now, the firm knows me so well that they really know that I want to run a marathon next year, but they realized also that I haven't trained last week, and so my running shoes start to kind of glow red, saying, like, Christian, it's time for you to run again. My retirement account is basically telling me, Christian, you've been underinvesting the last 6 weeks, put more money to the side. And so this is the idea of nudging. It's one nudge more proactive than curated offering, where you just make proposals. So I as a consumer, I'm standing at the edge of the pool, and you just nudge me friendly and make sure that I get wet.
Now, I'm guessing, as I'm hearing that, so let's say in healthcare, for example, insurance, the immediate thing that comes to mind is data, and the role of data. And obviously, different parts of the world have different approaches. Where you and I are originally from Europe, there is a certain form of data and the sharing of data and the data privacy. In the US, my understanding in the healthcare system, there's a lot of data flowing around there, but it's quite pocketed in individual companies. It's not so shared. And then we look at something like China, where they're winning the data race by many percentages ahead. So what are your thoughts in terms of the innovation around the data? You know, some like that data that we have as individuals is nudging us forward. Do you have any personal views as to whether that is data that we should be in control of there, or is it something that we should be passing out that we just have to kind of forget the idea of privacy in that sense and kind of go with what the machine suggests?
Yeah, let me answer the questions in two steps. I mean, first of all, let me finish your thought really on the importance of data for the first place, right? So if I think back to the first day I used the Uber platform, it worked well from day one because it didn't really require more than me revealing where I stand the moment I pressed the button on my phone. Uber didn't have to know anything about me. If you think then about curated offering and coach behavior, the platform needs to know the platform, and I say the platform in the sense of the system, the firm, needs to know a lot more about me to make good recommendations. And if I let you nudge me, it really almost means that I trust you more than myself, and there you really, really have to know me. And then you think about the very extreme case that we call automatic execution, where you're making decisions for me, right? With nudging, you say, like, Christian, it's time for to run. I know this example will not continue well, right? But with automatic execution is you run for me, right? I mean, that would obviously not get me the training benefit, but you think about financial investments, for example, where you say, like, Christian, by the way, I have sucked out the $500 from your last paycheck and automatically invested it for you. And knowing your risk profile, I've bought these and these pieces of equities or these and these bonds, right? I do it for you. And that requires, to go back to your question now, James, it really, really requires that the firm needs to know me really well in order to make these decisions. Now, that requires data, right? I mean, knowing me well is just another way of saying, like, the firm needs to have a lot of data about me, describing me. And that is a tricky thing, right? I mean, I don't trust anybody from the first day that I meet them. Just like with human being, I'm building up a relationship of trust over many interactions and potentially over years. And I think the same applies somewhat to firms, that I don't want to be positive or negative about firms that have a lot of data about me. I just want to make sure that the data that they have about me was given away by me voluntarily. And I think that gets to the examples, James, that you were hinting at, is that there has been a significant abuse of data where firms have collected data, they've used data without us consumers knowing that. And that is geographically somewhat different, depending where you go. And my experience has been, as you described, that in China, that is almost taken as a given that you are monitored all the time anyway, versus the Europeans have much more of a stronger attitude for privacy, protecting consumers against big firms and abuse.
And then you had that final of the four, which is the automated execution. It's interesting you mentioning investing, because I'm actually here, I'm speaking tomorrow at an investor conference, institutional investors who manage about 35 million individuals' pension funds. And one of the things getting talked a lot about here is why do we need some of these institutional investment companies, these advisors, when AIs are allowed to do some of these better for us, and they understand us better than maybe that person that we only speak to once every 6 months or a year. So can you talk about examples that you found that you thought were very interesting around that automatic execution?
Yeah, so if you think about the dilemma here, again, if you stay with investment for the moment, you stay with healthcare for the moment, those are interactions that are very, very high stakes. They're very important, but they're very episodic because oftentimes it involves, in the current way of doing things, it involves on the other side, the firm has a very expensive knowledge resource, an investment advisor, a skilled physician. Those are people making multiple hundreds of dollars per hour. And so almost by design, I cannot afford to see my doctor, or my doctor cannot afford me to see me every day, independent of whether that would be a waste of time or not. And my investment advisor would prefer to me just to speak with me once every 6 months. And that leads them to this dilemma that, I go through life every day, I'm making decisions that impact both my financials and my health, and I'm alone during that moment. And so wouldn't it be nice if we would be connected all the time? Again, you think about investment decisions where you're rebalancing portfolios depending on kind of you're automatically harvesting losses. A new tax law comes out, you win the lottery, your kids finish college. Life changes all the time, and portfolios need to be adjusted to capture those changes. Similarly, in health, you could imagine a situation where, again, we're talking a lot about the Apple Watch these days, where you have increasing diagnostic capabilities, where the Apple Watch is detecting at a normal heartbeat cardiology diagnostic that is unpleasant to the consumer. And for the cardiologist, on the other hand, even if I would see one, it would take another 3-6 months till I see him or her again, versus the watch could alert that cardiologist immediately and just take kind of corrective action.
I think I saw you write a post the other day talking about how, I think it was about a third of individuals now trust machines, artificial intelligence, and algorithms more than they trust politicians, or I think in terms of making policy decisions, which I think is quite interesting. I mean, I think we're also seeing self-driving cars as well, where there's a little bit of that reticent, do we trust this machine? And it feels like there's a little bit of we're moving towards a little bit of a tipping point there, where we're actually going to trust the AIs more than we would trust the humans in making some of these big decisions for us.
Yeah, that's a very kind of delicate issue. I mean, the bar to clear to trust the algorithm more than the politician, that's not a high bar to clear. In your country, James, nor...
Yeah, exactly, in our country just there.
But there is this idea that, again, if you look at situations where we've studied experts over time, experts are not doing that well either, right? And if you think about self-driving cars, the example that you brought up here, we have to realize that we as human beings, we are horrible drivers, right? I mean, I don't know the British data. The German data is 3,000 traffic fatalities every year. I think in the United States, you're talking about 25,000 people who get killed in car accidents every year. And we as a society, we just kind of take it as a cost of doing business, right? We don't think about it. And then, God forbid, a self-driving car kills one person, and it's all over the news, right? And so I think driving is an area where sooner or later it is time to hand over the steering wheels to the algorithm. Will that eliminate all problems immediately? No. But oftentimes, as you describe, algorithms are better decision makers. It is an interesting ethical decision, of course, because now when it's me driving badly, drunk driving, speeding, it's very clear who should go to jail. If a self-driving car kills somebody and the car is a mistake, then whose mistake was it, right? The person in the car, the person who designed the algorithm, the insurance company behind it. Those are fairly complex issues, but I think the direction that we will have more automatic execution, the direction is clear. It's then a nuance to figure out who is going to be in charge and paying the bill.
Yeah, that reminds me, there's that idea of like the trolley problem in philosophy, where
That's right, yeah.
Should the car go and kill the 3 young children, or should go and hit the older woman? And those are the things that actually have to be programmed into cars now. You also mentioned something on the innovation piece. It just made me think of there, where we have a new style of design now, like generative design, like Autodesk, where rather than the individual start the process of the innovation on something, you will just essentially say to the AI or to the design program, these are my criteria. I need it to weigh this much, to carry this much weight, to cost this much, to be made from this material. Go. And it creates like thousands of designs. If you go in the Airbus A380 now, many of those panels are created using that. And then the human team. And I guess there's like, who owns the innovation there? Or if that goes wrong, who owns that problem? Is it the designers of the programs of the technology? Is it the team that oversees that whole innovation process for that particular product?
Yeah, so the liability is certainly very complex here. I think to backtrack, like who is doing the innovation, I think it's helpful to just think about different forms in which a firm can provide a service or any kind of professional service or product to the consumer. It can do it all internally, which has been the Henry Ford way, the vertically integrated firm where Ford owned basically all the way backwards into the supply chain, all the way back to the mines and the forests that would bring out the wood. And what has happened in most industries really over the last 100 years is you're basically just doing smaller and smaller bits of the value chain. And the extreme cases that have been in these platforms that you have seen bubble up, be it Uber, be it a Lyft, where they're neither driving nor producing cars, they're just orchestrating the crowd, right? And they're having enormous value, as you saw in the IPO of Lyft. If you think about the valuation of Uber, those companies are worth as much as a BMW, or they're not producing anything really, right? They neither have drivers nor do they have cars, yet they're worth a lot of money. And I think, again, at the heart of that is connectivity, right? They're connecting entities in the value system that have previously not been connected. And so that goes back to our idea that it's really all about connecting things.
And can you just going back to your own, I suppose, you talk about process, that's what your own creative process. When you're working on a problem, something is interesting you, where do you go to find, first of all, inspiration? Right? Talk about, like, even some of the ideas that came out in this book. It'd be interesting to know your individual creative process for working on a book like this, especially because you had a co-author as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that creative process?
For me, the best form of innovation is the classroom, really. I think the interaction with students puts us in this enormous position where we're very close to the source of problems, if you will. And I'm not equating students with problems. The students bring problems of the companies that they work for to the classroom when we teach executive education, when we teach our MBA students. And they have made experiences, they have seen the world in a way that I have not seen the world, which really creates a lot of stimuli to kind of basically expose me to, that make me think about new things. And at the same time, the classroom is a very inexpensive laboratory for me to experiment with ideas, right? I can put out a framework, I can put out, here are the 5 things you need to know about a connected strategy. And today I tell the students it's the 3 things, tomorrow it's 4 things, the day after it's 5 things. I can test those out, and over time I basically get a sense of which of my points stick with the audience and which ones do not. And so I found the classroom is really the best place to kind of to experiment and to innovate when you write a new book.
And with innovation, there's that idea of like psychological safety, being willing to take risks. Can you tell us about a time when you worked on something, and it doesn't have to be necessarily related to the job you do, but it's something that you were doing, you're working on, you gave it your heart and your soul, an idea, but for whatever reason it didn't work out like you'd hoped. And more importantly, what was the lesson that you took from that experience?
Yeah, I think it's been somewhat common these days to have these failure parties and have people kind of talk about all the things that didn't work well. I'm mildly skeptical about them because it's very easy for somebody who was going to launch $1 billion venture to say like, oh, the previous 3 ventures didn't work out, and they almost brag with their failures. Since I haven't created $1 billion company, for me it's a little easier to brag about my failures because there are many. So you encounter failure in academia all the time when you write research papers, maybe not books necessarily, but research papers that you submit, and the audience, basically the reviewers, the journals, say like, we don't like that. And that's a very common, a very frustrating experience, especially if you're early on in your career. You have in the US a thing called tenure, where after 6-7 years you're up or out. And when you are exposed to such a failure, it really, really hurts. I did try to start a business or 2, and one of them went horribly badly. The other one went okay, but didn't make me rich either. So I've tried things, and I think it is part of life that some things work and some things don't. I think we oftentimes underestimate how much luck there is ultimately involved, right? I mean, we look at the great ideas that people have made millions, if not billions of dollars. And we always attribute everything to skill and hard work. I think there's a lot of luck in there. Be at the right place, be at the right time. And I think everybody, regardless whether they're a star innovator or somebody normal, quote unquote, I think a little bit of humbleness and kind of realizing how much luck is involved in this game of innovation is always a good thing.
And in your own creative journey, can you talk to us about maybe a key aha moment, the light bulb? There's also that phrase, the light bulb moment, the insight that happened in your life where you went, oh, okay, this is a key insight that I had, or a direction I want to go with my work.
Yeah, so for me, it was realizing that I was kind of mildly joking in the introduction, but it's really true. I'm not particularly innovative. It was, for me, something that initially I was kind of trying to resist, but I realized, and at some point you have to come to peace with that. But it made me realize that as somebody who was doing a lot of work with firms, big or small, helping students to innovate, there is in this world of innovation, there are other jobs than being the innovator yourself. You can be the mentor, you can be the manager of the process again. And I think many executives would benefit from that insight, that if you're vice president of product development, vice president of innovation, the insight here is that you don't have to innovate yourself. Your job is to make sure that you put the right process, the right performance metrics, the right culture in place, that the people in your organizations who have the right idea, that they will shine and succeed. I think that's an insight that oftentimes in corporate settings get lost, where the persons in charge of innovation, they feel like it's us, right? I mean, we have it on our business card. We're not realizing that you really, as an innovator, you have to stand on the shoulders of others. You have to recruit an army, and then basically, you're much more likely to get the right kind of nuggets, the right insights into customer needs that are unmet at the moment, as opposed to you trying to do everything yourself.
And as we finish up here, a couple of quick fire questions for you. Is there any online resource or app or tool that you find very useful for doing the work that you do?
I mean, I hate to admit it, but YouTube is pretty good. I mean, I see my kids learning these days and lots of things that you and I had to go to the library when we were children. You just type it into YouTube and you learn a lot of useful stuff.
And then if I was to ask you to recommend one book and also one piece of music, one album to our listeners, what would that be? I
don't know if German rock music of the 80s count, but
go for it.
Herbert Grönemeyer is somebody who has always left an imprint for me. I'm from the German coal and mine area, the Ruhrgebiet, the industrial heartland of Germany. And there's some real beauty in these ballad type of songs. They're like rock ballads of the 80s, and they're describing kind of the nature of hard work, honest work, and that they have left a big impact on me.
And then what would the book be? If you're not one of your own books, but a book by another author, you just think is a great, it could be on innovation, or it just is something you read recently, you've gifted more often to other people.
Well, for me, the favorite book I read was, as a PhD student, I read the book by Karl Ulrich and Steve Eppinger from MIT at that time. Karl Ulrich later on moved to Wharton, became a close friend and co-author, called Product Design and Development. And what that book really taught me was really to demystify this process of product development. I mean, they just really boil it down to a cookbook that I, as a young assistant professor 20 years ago, I could teach. As an innovator, you can walk through. And I think it did a really awesome job to kind of take something as messy, as complex, as ambiguous as product development and just boiled it down into a couple of very organized cooking recipes.
Fantastic. I'm going to put those links here for everyone so they can check those out. And I want you to imagine tomorrow morning you wake up and you have to start from scratch. I'm going to let you choose anywhere in the world. You wake up tomorrow morning, but you have all the skills, all the knowledge you've acquired over the years, but no one knows you. You know no one. You have to restart. What would you do? How would you restart?
I think I would give it a shot on online teaching. I think we're maybe a little late to that game now, but I was just really overwhelmed by the power of creating content, be it what you're doing with podcasts, lectures, taking content and free from institutional pressures, just basically rely on the internet, to rely on the wisdom of the crowds to get the word out and just change the world one click at a time.
It's certainly a fascinating time to be alive, and also to be an educator like yourself as well. And we see like people like Jordan Peterson and on that side of things, like these rock star educators, or some of the folks on the artificial intelligence or the business side. It's actually a pretty fascinating time to be an educator in business.
I guess it's always been a good time to be an educator. That's one of the decisions in life we have very little choice over, right? And so we have to run with what we got. But I certainly want to make a big plug to everybody in education. I think it's a wonderful profession. Doesn't matter whether you teach math to first graders, whether you're teaching finance for executives. I think education has always been a very important element for any type of society, and I think it's in bigger need than ever before.
And Christian, if people want to reach out to you to learn more about your work, also to learn about Connected Strategy, the new book as well, where's the best place for them to go and do that?
So you can find me on Twitter under Terwiesch. My Coursera course is on Coursera called Operations Management. And I have all my resources, my books, many videos on my website, terwiesch.com. So I know it's kind of, my kids point out that terwiesch.com sounds very commercial, but it's all free on there. And so take a look, and we're great to connect.
Well, Christian, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Wish you all the great success with the book. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing about your creative life.
Thanks, James. Been a pleasure.
If you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.